When Tsai Ing-wen became Taiwan's president in 2016, one of the first things she addressed was the looming threat to security in the Asia-Pacific. Tsai took office at a time when China, which has long threatened to invade Taiwan, was increasingly capable of taking over the country. The possibility of war had loomed over Taiwan for decades, but many people didn't take it seriously, thinking Beijing would never invade. Tsai's first challenge was demonstrating that times were changing and the threat was real.
I think it was difficult for the Tsai administration to really push for defense reform because there was such fundamental disagreement about the nature of the threat. And of course, it would not make sense to do things that would be provocative to Beijing, that would then provoke it to do things that you then have to respond with more defense measures.
To modernize Taiwan's military, Tsai increased defense spending faster than any previous president. In her 8 years in office, Taiwan's total defense budget almost doubled. The extra funding allowed Taiwan to invest more in the military systems it needed to enhance its security.
She had two challenges. One, she had to play catch-up because Taiwan forced modernization is an ongoing year-on-year effort. President Tsai comes into office, and the previous administrations, both in Taiwan and the United States, had all but ignored the threat from the Chinese in the Taiwan Strait.
But even with more money going into Taiwan's defense, Tsai faced a big problem in revamping the country's strategy. In 2017, then Chief of the General Staff, Admiral Li Ximing, introduced the overall defense concept. It was an innovative, modern approach to warfare, focused on an asymmetric strategy. It prioritized smaller, more mobile weapons like missiles, drones, and mines over big, expensive hardware like tanks and fighter jets. Military officials didn't like that.
Those entrenched interests are really about preserving the service's equities, largely about wanting the next and greatest large platforms, whether that's fighter jets, tanks, or capital ships. I think Tsai did hit resistance when she tried to move to what we in the United States would term an asymmetric approach to defense.
With little support, the overall defense concept ended up just that, a concept that was never really put into action. Many in Washington say this was one of Tsai's biggest security failures.
First and foremost among these criticisms is the fact that she allowed the overall defense concept, which really came to fruition under her watch, to just wither and die on the vine. And many of us here in the US think asymmetric warfighting concepts, that really is the only way that Taiwan can effectively defend itself.
With China growing more vocal with its threats against Taiwan, Tsai vowed to continue modernizing the country's military. Taiwan stepped up cooperation with the US to acquire some of the world's most advanced weapons.
She worked with the United States to regularize and normalize the arms sales process and security assistance. Secondly, she worked with the United States to raise the ambition in US-Taiwan security cooperation so that we could talk about things that previously were not being discussed.
In 2019, Taiwan spent a huge amount to purchase 66 F-16 fighter jets and more than 100 M1 Abrams battle tanks. 2 years later, it signed another deal worth $5 billion to upgrade its existing fleet of 140 F-16s. For decades, the US has been Taiwan's largest provider of weapons. But seeing how dependent Taipei was on Washington, Tsai also took steps to ease that reliance, injecting billions of dollars into the country's domestic defense industry.
Taiwan, of course, has a very capable, technologically advanced society. And it also has experience making weapon systems and platforms before. So Tsai, was able to tap into something that already existed, and I think that she did a good job building up the capacity.
Tsai oversaw the production of the country's first advanced indigenous jet trainers. She more than tripled the production of missiles and commissioned dozens of domestically made warships, most notably unveiling the country's first indigenous submarine. But while Taiwan boosted its military hardware, Tsai also made critical changes to the military structure. In 2022, Tsai extended mandatory military service from 4 months to a year and introduced more realistic conscript training. But it was a move that many analysts say came too late.
And the Tsai administration had at least 4 years to really lean into this. And instead, it kind of felt it was okay to rest on its laurels and say, look, at least we're spending enough on the problem.
Although Tsai laid much of the defense groundwork for the next administration, many here in Taiwan say her legacy will be more about the confidence she gave the military to defend the country.
我觉得蔡英文是台湾的 Iron Lady 铁娘子。第一个，她让台湾军人的地位就是比较受到重视。第二个，她亲自去巡视很多的基地，她是台湾总统历年来巡视基地最多的。所以在这种情况下，台湾军队就比较有自信。那也做了更多的这个所谓的训练跟演习。
Security analysts say that whether Tsai did enough will be up to historians to decide. While it's still too early to tell whether the new weapon systems and reforms will deter China, one thing is certain. Tsai's 8 years in office upheld Taiwan's sovereignty and ensured peace. Joseph Wu and Jaime Ocon for TaiwanPlus.